What's up, Wonders of London fans? It's me, Vincent from Wonders of London, and today I can't stand up. We are in London Bridge Station, where you have this wonderful organ. Now, I can't play the organ, as you heard over there, but there's always something cool. In fact, you've got a lot of pianos around London, but this is the first time I've seen an organ out in the open for members of the public to play. So remember, make your way to London Bridge for this and many amazing other things. But today we're doing the Walk to the Tower tour, and it does meet here in London Bridge Station at the other side. One important thing, if you ever need a toilet, they're right there in London Bridge Station, and there is a shopping area as well as a place you can buy flowers. But it is rush hour now, as you can see, quite a few people. So let's go outside to see one of the main things about the London Bridge area. Now, outside one of the many exits, and there are many exits to London Bridge Station, you have this little area called More London. And of course, it is from here where we get our first view of the Shard, or our first glimpse of the Shard. And the Shard is the tallest building in London. It's the tallest building in England and Britain, standing at about 310 metres, or 309.6 metres. Now, I failed maths, so I can't tell you what that is in feet, but it is a very tall building, and you can actually go to the top of the Shard to get a view of London. You do need to get tickets to get this view, but I will show you on this tour another place where you can go and get a wonderful view of London for free, and a much cheaper place as well, where you can also get a bit of exercise in. The Shard was designed by the Italian architect Renzo Piano, and he allegedly, now this is an urban legend, so we don't know if it's true or not, probably not true because you have a similar story of a building in Manchester, but he allegedly said he did not want to get paid, and instead he wanted the penthouse suite. And when the Shard opened, he apparently put the penthouse suite on the market for £60 million, so quite a pretty penny, or 60 million euros depending on the version of the story. But it is quite interesting because that legend, urban legend of course, exists with another building in England, probably in Manchester. But there you have it, the Shard. You have restaurants, apartments, offices, and several other things, including the viewing platform. But here, still by the station, we have some lovely maps, and it just rained, which makes it pretty cool because this is a representation of the river, and you can see the water going through there. But this is a miniature 3D map of the More London area, with the Tower of London where we're going on the other side of the river. You've got the HMS Belfast, which we will be able to see later on, and you've got some of the buildings here in the More London area, and it is quite phenomenal just to have a look at. And of course, there once again is the Shard. Now, the reason I brought you over here is actually to show you this lovely little merchant line. For centuries, maritime trade from around the world centred on the upper pool area of the River Thames. London's wharves were imported by materials from local industries exporting goods the area produced. Discovered typical cargoes of the 17th and 18th centuries by following this lovely merchant line. But the amazing thing about the merchant line is the view you get at the very end over there. That is one of the towers of Tower Bridge. So as you walk along here, you get some wonderful photo opportunities of Tower Bridge. And also, look at the sky. Can you see that sign? It's telling us it's a sunny day, 14 degrees, but look at the sky. It is not sunny at all. I always have a problem with the London weather. Here you've got tanned leather from Rochester, 25 miles, cider from Devon, 150 miles. And as we continue, we're not going to go all the way because don't worry, we will be able to see the Tower Bridge in all its glory later. But this is our first glimpse of one of the towers of the Tower Bridge in the distance over there. You also have a lot of interesting sculptures in More London, like that lady there. And the tower is coming more and more into view. And as we continue, I'm just going to turn around here to show you another view of the Shard. But before I do, as we're making this video, we still have this wonderful exhibition about chimpanzees and the illegal poaching of them. So how lovely is that? This chimp is Chase, male, aged 11. There is Tower Bridge once again, but from here, look at this wonderful view of the Shard once again. Now over here we've got the two pyramids at London Bridge Station. We can see the Shard over there, and I love this little colourful pyramid. It gives you a bit of the history of the area, like telling us that the first London Bridge was actually built around 50 AD. Now that's a contested date, which is quite an interesting thing. But here we can see the Thames used to be the centre of London's global trade industry and was lined by wharves and warehouses along its banks, as well as our spices, tea and coffee. All manner of goods passed through the busy docks. At its height in the 19th century, Hayes Wharf, now Hayes Galleria, handled 80% of London's important goods, earning the nickname the Larder of London. Here we got London Bridge Station, one of the oldest stations in the world, not just in London, opened in 1836. We've got the directions over there, which are quite fantastic. And we're going to be going to London Bridge. Now, do you guys know the nursery rhyme? London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. London Bridge is falling down, my fair lady. Now, there are many different legends and stories as to where we get that nursery rhyme. And I'm going to give you a list of some of them, but one of them, sorry, they're doing works over there, so it's a bit noisy, but one of them is connected to this individual, and I will tell you a bit more about it later on. But as you can see over here, that is St. Olaf at Olaf's house. St. Olaf's house, King of Norway, and he was the first Christian king of Norway. Now let's go have a view of London Bridge itself. We are now arriving at one of my favourite spots in Bankside. In fact, my favourite spot in Bankside, by the river over here. But it's one of my favourite spots by the river in this part of London. We're in the London Borough of Southwark, and of course over here we actually have a wonderful quote from Sir Walter Raleigh. There are two things scarce matched in the universe: the sun in the heaven and the Thames on earth. As you can see over there. So Walter Raleigh was actually executed in 1618 at the Houses of Parliament's Westminster Palace. However, he had been held prisoner, where we're going to finish the walk, down there at the Tower of London. So his story was quite a sad one. But over here we can see the river. Do you guys agree with Sir Walter Raleigh's estimation of the river? There are two things scarce matched in the universe: the sun in the heavens or the Thames on earth. Now, of course, right here we've got the London Bridge. And the London Bridge is the eponymous London Bridge, built by the Romans perhaps some 2,000 years ago, around 58 AD. And of course, the Romans used rope and bridges made of rope and wood. And as such, they were liable to catching fire and rotting and falling into the river, which also partially contributed to the nursery rhyme, London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down, because the rivers did, the bridges rather, did literally fall into the River Thames. Now, Londoners, after the collapse of Roman London, would continue to use London Bridge, and they would continue using the rope and wooden bridges, the wooden and rope bridges, for almost 1,000 years. However, we've got King Canute, the Danish king, and he would become the first Viking king of England. And when he wanted to conquer, there was the famous Battle of London Bridge, which also involved the English king, but also involved King Olaf, who we saw earlier at St. Olaf's house by London Bridge Station, as I showed you a few moments ago. And when they were fighting, it resulted in them pulling down the old London Bridge, literally making the old wooden London Bridge fall into the river. So King Canute and King Olaf of Norway, Canute of Denmark, pulled down the old London Bridge. Now you can see, it's not historically accurate however, but you can see a rendition of this, or a replay of this, in the Netflix TV show Vikings. They did an episode where they pulled down the old London Bridge. An interesting thing about London Bridge is it wasn't always known as London Bridge. Up until the 1750s, around 1750, it was actually the only bridge in what we consider to be London today. And as such, it was simply known by many as the bridge. It was not London Bridge, simply the bridge. It would eventually become known as London Bridge many years later. But in fact, around 1209, we have the first stone bridge being built on this site. And that bridge would last for about 600 years. But that bridge had 20 arches. And I'm going to show you this a picture of this bridge later on. But it had 20 arches going underneath it. And these 20 arches, because they were in the water in winter, the river would freeze over. And of course, if you know anything about science, when the river freezes over, water expands. When water freezes, it expands. It expanded and damaged 3 of these stone arches. And of course, the bridge was literally crumbling into the water. And like the old Roman bridges, and like King Canute and Olaf, and of course, with this bridge crumbling into the water, that would also contribute to the old nursery rhyme, London Bridge is falling down. But that's not the only thing, because they would repair that bridge and it would last for about 600 years. And in the 1800s, they had to get rid of it and they built a new bridge. Once again, in the 1960s, they had to get rid of that old bridge. And in fact, an American gentleman, Mr. P. McCulloch, Robert P. McCulloch, actually heard that they were going to get rid of the old London Bridge. And he decided to buy it. And in fact, this stone is one of the few remnants of the London Bridge designed by Sir John Rennie. The bridge spanned the river from 1831 to 1967. And it was then sold to Robert P. McCulloch, an American entrepreneur, and today can be found in Arizona, USA. So quite a fascinating thing. And he paid somewhere in the region of $2 million to buy the old London Bridge. And they shipped it apart brick by brick, sent it over to America. Once in America, in Arizona, they put it back together. And legend has it that the Americans called the English and they said, "What is this?" And the English said, "Well, it's London Bridge." Well, to cut a long story short, basically, legend has it, he thought he was buying Tower Bridge, which we will see later on. But of course, he wasn't buying Tower Bridge. Tower Bridge is a London Bridge, but not the London Bridge. This is, in fact, the London Bridge. Now, do any of you believe that particular legend? Do you think it's true? Well, in London, we often like to tell people that it is true that the Americans actually bought the wrong bridge. However, there is some evidence that seems to suggest that Mr. P. McCulloch knew what bridge he was buying because he was photographed in front of that said bridge. So he has a photograph in front of the old London Bridge, which of course indicates that he knew the bridge that he was buying. However, one interesting thing is, while that may be true, lots of Americans did flock over to Arizona expecting to see the London Bridge, expecting to see the London Bridge they thought was Tower Bridge. And they were so disappointed when they saw the old John Rennie London Bridge. But there you have it, a little bit of London Bridge. Now we're going to walk over London Bridge in a few moments, but first I want to show you a couple of interesting pubs. Now over here we have one of my favourite photo opportunities in London. This is by Southwark Cathedral, and you can get the last 2,000 years of London's history and the sun right here in one shot. So of course this statue that we see over here is of the goddess Minerva, the Roman goddess. So this represents a Roman London. Then you've got Southwark Cathedral. There's been a place for Christian worship around here for about 1,400 years. And of course we've got the Shard right there, which is the 21st century building. So quite a lovely photo opportunity right there. Do feel free to make screenshots if you would like to. Just by London Bridge, you have quite a few lovely pubs. One of my favourites, but not my favourite. I will show you my favourite in the area, but one of my favourites is this. Now, do any of you like Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels by Guy Ritchie? Do any of you like Bridget Jones's Diary? Or do any of you like Harry Potter? Well, if you like any of those, well, this is the pub you must visit, because have a look at this. Right here, you can see it has been used as a film set for Bridget Jones's Diary, Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels by Guy Ritchie, starring Jason Statham, if I'm not mistaken, and Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. This is the Mudlark, established in the mid-1700s. So it is quite a fascinating place. Now the name Mudlark refers to an old job that people used to do by the beaches of the River Thames. They would go to the beaches of the Thames sifting through the sand and pebbles looking for treasures. And I will talk a bit more about that later on. But quite close, you've got a sister pub to the Mudlark. Quite close to the Mudlark is my personal favourite pub, right under the bridge, and it is that red pub over there, the Mug House, with bar and dining room. And it is quite amazing. They do wine and cheese here. Just got to watch out for cars and vehicles. But as you can see right here, the Mug House, it is brilliant. It feels for me, whenever I go in the Mug House, that I've walked into a little hobbit hole. You've got a newer pub here by London Bridge Experience. Now, an interesting story about the London Bridge Experience is, as I'll tell you later on, they used to put heads of beheaded people on London Bridge, and you used to have 3 heads, fake heads, not real heads of course, right here, but those were actually stolen by someone during the first lockdown, if I'm not mistaken. They've turned part of it into the Bermondsey Beer Keller, and at the moment, we're making this video in October, at the moment we actually have Oktoberfest as well as Halloween, so they've got a couple of things going on over there. But speaking of Halloween, let's just have a look at this, a little spooky bit for you guys. We've got a gibbeted skeleton right here. So this was a terrible punishment. Most of the time they would execute you before putting you in there, but it was quite a terrible thing. Anyway, let's go on to London Bridge. On London Bridge, where we get another lovely view of the Shard, but we're about to enter the City of London. Technically, we're already in the City of London because London Bridge is managed by the City of London, the square mile built by the Romans, which they called Londinium 2,000 years ago. But the City of London is guarded by dragons. There be dragons, here be dragons. And of course, there's one of the dragons you can find over there. City of London, London Bridge. So let's come up over here. We're going to walk down both ways of London Bridge and get some lovely shots from London Bridge. But first, on this side, if we're coming from the Shard, it's the left-hand side of the bridge. You get some wonderful shots of St. Paul's from here, as you can see. Now have a look at St. Paul's. Let me zoom in for you. Now have a look at St. Paul's over there. The building to the right of St. Paul's is Cannon Street Rail Bridge. Now, as I continue walking this way, over into the City of London proper, look at what is happening to St. Paul's Cathedral. It is slowly moving behind one of the towers of Cannon Street train station by the Cannon Street Rail Bridge. As it appears again, you can, in a few moments, centre St. Paul's in the middle of Cannon Street Rail Bridge. How cool is that? You now have a perfect, almost perfect centre. 3 domes of London with St. Paul's over there, and it is quite a phenomenal thing. So we've moved a little bit, but you can still see St. Paul's is now on the other side. But as I pan to this side, have a look at the HMS Belfast in the middle of Tower Bridge over there. So that is Tower Bridge, not London Bridge. And as I zoom in, you can see it a little bit. We're going to cross over to the other side to get a better view of it. Whoop, sorry, the wind there. But yeah, let's head on. Now earlier, I promised you a cheaper place than the Shard to go for a view. Now don't get me wrong, the view at the Shard is amazing, but it can be quite costly. But here it's much cheaper to actually get a wonderful panoramic view of London. And this is the monument dedicated to the Great Fire of London, or commemorating rather, the Great Fire of London 1666. It was designed by Robert Hooke in consultation with the great Sir Christopher Wren, who designed St. Paul's Cathedral, which we saw earlier. And of course, it was to commemorate the Great Fire of London 1666. It has a freestanding fluted Doric column topped by a flaming copper urn, and it's about 61 meters or 202 feet in height, which means when you go all the way up there, you'll be about 61 meters in the sky, getting a wonderful view of London. Now, here's the key thing: there are no lifts or elevators, but it is 311 stairs up, 311 stairs down, but you get wonderful panoramic views of the city. Now, what we get over here in the center is King Charles II, my favorite king in English history, who is quite an interesting king, very naughty king, but you get him there on the right where my finger is now. That's Charles II, and he is sort of rescuing London, and he's addressing Lady London, who is slumped in the left bottom corner over there with the sword, and he's kind of like, I am here to rescue you. This is a slightly different story, but quite an interesting one. We can go around this way now. If you were to drop the monument west, it will apparently land, the top of it, on Pudding Lane, which is where the Great Fire of London 1666 is believed to have begun, in a baker's premises. But there you have it, the monument, and right here where we have these benches, the stone benches, London's burning, London's burning. Fetch the engines, fetch the engines. Fire, fire. It is right here on Pudding Lane. A bit further that way is where the fire is believed to have begun. But it is here on Pudding Lane where the Great Fire of London 1666 began. Now, the Great Fire of London burned through about 3/4 of the City of London. When I say the City of London, I'm not talking about what we consider London to be today. I'm merely talking about the square mile that is known as the City of London. Technically, it's a square mile around St. Paul's Cathedral. Technically, it's kind of 2 square miles, but that is what we call the City of London, and there is the monument commemorating the Great Fire of London 1666. So we're back on London Bridge, and we're going to walk over to the other side to get a lovely view of Tower Bridge. But I just thought I'd show you this because you get a wonderful shot, and look at the sun reflected in the Thames over there. Simply gorgeous. But we're coming over here to get a view once again of the HMS Belfast and Tower Bridge. And there you have it. Brilliant shot. We can see all the way east and southeast. So over here we've got the Shard. It's going to be a bit tricky because it's so windy, but have a look over there. In the water we have Tower Bridge, and once again, like we did on the other side with St. Paul's Cathedral, we are going to centre the HMS Belfast in the middle of Tower Bridge, which is quite fantastic. Now, London Bridge used to be a very interesting place. We were talking about London Bridge earlier. You actually used to have houses on London Bridge, and you used to have a church, and I'll show you what it used to look like. But have a look over there. We've got a boat coming up as we slowly centre the HMS Belfast on the Thames. Very windy, apologies if you can hear a lot of wind. I'm trying to shield the microphone from the wind, but it's about to move the phone. But here we are, blow wind blow, and there we have it, HMS Belfast in the centre of Tower Bridge. I'm going to stop here because the wind is blowing so hard, but do feel free to make a screenshot, guys. We're almost at the end of the bridge. It's very windy, apologies about the wind. I wish I could control the wind, but I cannot. But hopefully you guys could see the wonderful reflections over here with St. Paul's right there as we move. And of course you've got the Sky Garden, the walkie-talkie reflected over there, and St. Paul's makes another appearance. This is #1 London Bridge, quite a brilliant address. And once again, the City of London Dragons. Now, this is #1 London Bridge, and I do love walking down these stairs, the first part at any rate. The second part is very cool as well, but everything seems to be modern art these days, which can be annoying when you're going downstairs. So this is okay. As you can see, nice straight stairs over there, but once you get here, I always get a bit dizzy, so I don't like coming down. I love coming down these stairs, but not as often, because look, they're at a slant, they're at an angle right here as we go down. So a bit of a tricky set of stairs. But there you have the City of London buildings, and I love these columns here because you can frame your photos of the city. Got the HMS Belfast coming up once again, but there are the city buildings. Now earlier I showed you the monument, so you can buy tickets to go there. It's not too expensive, but you do need to pay to go there. But there is a place where you can go up entirely for free, and it is that rectangular looking building, the walkie-talkie, that you see over there. You've got the Sky Garden at the top. So if you look over there at the top, that is the Sky Garden. You can go all the way to the top and get wonderful views of London. And they've got a garden up there, so it's pretty cool. And it's entirely free, but you have to book online, and it is hard to get tickets. But I highly recommend, if you want an amazing view of London, you can go up there. So those are the three options. You've got the monument, the walkie-talkie, the Sky Garden, and of course the Shard. Now back here on the Shard side, you actually have one of my favourite views of the HMS Belfast and Tower Bridge right there. Wonderful photo opportunity, and of course you can kind of angle it around to move the pieces a bit. And there we have the city views. You also have the pier here where you can get boats like the Uber boat and several other kinds of boats. But over there you have London Bridge once again. Now, if you come here at dusk, you get some wonderful sunsets, and you can play around with this structure. But we're just coming here to get a view once again of St Paul's Cathedral in the distance over there, but more importantly London Bridge. Now, do you remember I told you earlier that the old London Bridge had 20 arches running underneath it? Now we can see the current London Bridge over there, but let's have a look at the old London Bridge. As I mentioned earlier, I am actually going to show you a wonderful view of the old London Bridge. Like I said, it actually had houses on it, and you can see it right here, view of old London Bridge. There were houses on the bridge, and in the centre there was actually a church. Now this is the old London Bridge, not the John Rennie London Bridge, but the one before that from the 15th century. And this is a view of it at night. And you had shops on there, and it was quite a busy bridge. One of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons Tower Bridge would be built was because more than 100,000 people would use London Bridge every day. And because you had more than 100,000 people using the bridge, they needed more bridges for more people to cross over from here into the City of London, which we're looking at the moment on the other side of the river over there. So that would result in many more bridges being built. But not only did 100,000 people use the old London Bridge every day, 100,000 plus, you also had the horses, and you had a market. And of course you had the houses and the church. It was a very busy, cramped, quite disgusting bridge, because our horses go to the toilet everywhere and anywhere. But that's perhaps not the most disgusting thing you had on the old London Bridge. We're going to be finishing this this tour at the Tower of London, and some people who were executed at the Tower of London and other places, of course, particularly for treason, they would find themselves being beheaded, and then their heads would be put on spikes, and those spikes would be displayed on London Bridge to serve as a warning: do not do whatever this person did. And of course you have 100,000 people using the old London Bridge. That's quite a disturbing scene. But there you have it, a little bit of the history of London Bridge. Now the area we're in is Hayes Galleria, which used to be wharves. All the goods coming from around the world, from Asia, the tea, from the Americas as they were known at the time, the sugar, cotton, rum, tobacco, some of them would be stored right here. We're also in an area known as the London Pool, but today it is shopping, and you've got a bar and festivals in the summer. For Christmas you actually have a lot of wonderful things, a Christmas market that should be coming soon, but that is very cool. Now there's a sculpture in here that I want to show you. You can just about see it behind the flowers, but let's get a bit closer. Haze on the river. Now you've got the bars and restaurants here where you can come and eat and dine and sit and enjoy all the revelry and stuff, but this is the monument I wanted to show you. Wonderful, beautiful monument. Whoops, missed a step there. And this partially represents the history of London. As I mentioned earlier, the mudlark, so people would go mudlarking on the River Thames. It was a job for the poorest of the poor, and they would look for treasures. Now let's consider this. More than 2,000 years ago, the Celtic people invaded from Europe and they settled in Britain, and some of them settled in London as well. After the Celts, we had the Romans invading Britain, and they built what we call Londinium, what they called Londinium, we call the city of London today. After the Romans, we had the Jutes and the Angles and the Saxons invading. Then we had the Vikings, the Norwegians, the Danish, etc. And of course, King Canute, as we mentioned earlier, would become the first Viking king of all of England. Then after the Vikings and all the different sorts of Vikings who invaded, we had, of course, the Normans of France all invading, and they all settled by the River Thames because it was such an important resource, and as such many treasures can be found by the River Thames. And this sculpture that we've just walked around a couple of times represents, you've got little elements, if you look close enough, you've got little elements representing each of those peoples who have settled here in London. And of course this also means London has been technically for about 2,000 years the most multicultural city in the world. Now very soon, Christmas time, you're going to have an amazing Christmas tree right up over here. But one brilliant thing about Hayes Galleria are the telephone booths, which we're going to see in a few moments. You've got 4 telephone booths, so it is great, a great place to come and take photos. You've got lots of cafes as well. Apparently the best pizza in town is right there, but I will show you these two because the others are covered. But here are 2 wonderful London telephone booths. Fantastic. One thing I really love are the reflections, because this is a city of glass, a city of concrete, and of course we've got the Tower Bridge there, but check out these brilliant reflections. Tower Bridge reflected. We have a reflection of the walkie-talkie, the 2 walkie-talkies there. So be sure to always check out the reflections in this area. You get some interesting photo opportunities. Now here we have the Scoop and another wonderful view of Tower Bridge. You have so many glass buildings in the area, but perhaps the most iconic is the Shard once again, which is peeking out from the corner. Now if you remember, we started just down there and we tried to walk all the way, halfway rather, and then we went back round. But this is the full view, if we continued walking, of Tower Bridge and City Hall, or the old City Hall there. Here we have another reflection by Temaquinho, where they do Brazilian sushi. Never tried it, but look at that. There's the real article Tower Bridge. Now in this bit you actually have a lovely little fountain. It looks turned off at the moment, but this is actually #1 Tower Bridge. So earlier we saw #1 London Bridge, but here we have #1 Tower Bridge, where we have the statue of Sir Simon Milton, the former Deputy Mayor of London between 2008 and 2011. And I just love this little fountain, which is turned off at the moment. And you get some wonderful reflections running through it. Now I'm going to show you another lovely fountain in a few moments. But let's turn around this way and have a look at that. Very lovely. Now usually they also have lights on this fountain, so if you come at night it is very, very beautiful. We are now in the Shad Thames area, where we got a wonderful fountain or sculpture called Waterfall over here. This is one of my favourite sculptures in London. It is of ladies just relaxing at the bathing. And one thing I love is they have these little bits like the Walkman and the harmonica there. Do you guys know Walkmans? Remember the Walkmans, the old analog cameras? Over here we got some pens for writing, pen and book. Of course someone's left their slippers there. But it is a simply beautiful and marvellous sculpture. Here you got some books to read. Let's see if we can get the title over here. It's the pocket edition of The Talisman. Cool. Need to get that book now. And as we come round we can see where we began, right here. But one of the cool things about this is when you come out on this bit, if you go where the Starbucks in Clutton's is, you get to see the amazing Tower Bridge. Now let's see how much a place here will cost you. 850 quid per week, furnished, if you get a place to live in one of these former warehouse apartments. Now this is an area called Shad Thames. Monet, the painter, actually came here to paint workers in the 1800s. He came to London a few times, Monet, but the first time he came to London was when some of the artists and people were fleeing the Franco-Prussian War. But there you have it, the wonderful view of Tower Bridge I mentioned earlier. Now, it being October, it is of course autumn, so we can see some of the lovely views. We have now gone onto Tower Bridge, but let's have a look at these marvellous views. There, once again, the Shard has been following us from the beginning. But over here, we start getting the wide and wonderful open expanses, views of the River Thames. We're looking west to the west of London, and it is a simply phenomenal view. There is the Tower Bridge itself. But over here are the city buildings and Southwark buildings of the HMS Belfast. People trying to figure out the London map there. So I tell them I'm a tour guide, now I'll leave it. But how lovely is this? Of course, you can play around. Have a look over here. If you come to this side, it looks like you're looking through the eye of something, and you have that wonderful photo opportunity, which is very, very cool. But that is the masterpiece. That is Tower Bridge. Not London Bridge, but Tower Bridge. So do remember that. It's quite a beautiful bridge. I think it might be, although some people may say the San Francisco Bridge or the Golden Gate Bridge is the most famous bridge in the world. What do you guys think? I do think Tower Bridge is the most famous bridge in the world. Built in 1894. But there we have the wonderful view once again. Now there's a fascinating story, a couple of fascinating stories over here, which I'll tell you about in a few moments. The first story is of something you must never ever do. It is of a YouTuber who thought it would be a great idea to jump from here into the water to make a video and see what it's like. Now the mistake they made was they didn't realize that apparently the Thames is the deepest right here, and it flows at the fastest. Now, I failed maths, so don't ask me too many questions about the mathematical equations, but it is said to flow at a rate of somewhere around 9 knots per hour. And of course, the fastest Olympic swimmer, if I'm not mistaken, was Michael Phelps, who could swim at 3 knots an hour. So of course, the river is quite powerful, and it can pull you away, no matter how good you are at swimming. I personally can't swim, so you'll never catch me doing that. Now, another interesting story is of a bus driver. We can see the 78 bus to Nunhead going over there. Now, some of you may already know that Tower Bridge opens, but did you know that once Tower Bridge opened, and for some reason the warning mechanism wasn't working, and it resulted in a bus driver actually not realizing that the bridge was opening and realizing it too late. So they actually had to jump over a little gap open in the bridge. Luckily, no passengers were injured. Sadly, the driver was injured, but they did survive. And the driver just had to accelerate and jump over the gap between the Tower Bridge. Now, here are some more wonderful views to the west, but let's have a quick look east. Over there we can see a little bit of Canary Wharf heading towards Greenwich, and it is very windy. Now we're about to enter a wonderful little area of the City of London, St Katharine's Docks. And St Katharine's Docks actually took their name, or St Katharine's Docks took their name from the former Hospital of St Katharine's by the Tower, as you can see written over here. So I've just read that, and it was built in the 12th century. Now, we did see some telephone booths earlier, but these are some of the most amazing. Have a look at that with all the flowers. Now, these are fake flowers, of course, but still quite a lovely explosion of colour here in St Katharine's Docks. Beautiful. But as we continue this way, St Katharine's Docks is quite a rich area. There's a little map of what it kind of looks like over here, but you've got a lot of the yachts, and people have their boats here. So very nice, fantastic place. You can actually take tours on some of the boats, much like the ones we see over here, like the Arduino, which is the one on the left there where the two people are working. Of course, you have some houseboats or house yachts. I would not mind living like this.
Well, just nothing.
Simply phenomenal. Another fascinating thing about this area is, do any of you like Stanley Kubrick, particularly Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey? If you do, there's a little bit of Stanley Kubrick and 2001 Space Odyssey trivia right here in St Katharine's Docks, which is located by Tower Bridge and the Tower of London. As we continue this way, you will be able to see a little bit of this wonderful trivia. Because up here on the right, you have a very interesting crystalline block with the crest in the middle. And it looks beautiful at night because they do light it up at night. But look at the plaque over here. The Silver Jubilee Crystal Crown was sculpted on this site by Arthur Fleischmann, KCSG, FRBS, MD, who pioneered carving in perspex. The block measures 10.9 by 5.9 by 8 inches. Thick and weighs 2 tons. It is the largest solid block of acrylic in the world. It was originally made in 1968 for Stanley Kubrick's film 2001 A Space Odyssey, but was rejected by the director in favour of the now famous black basalt monolith. So have a look at that, a little bit of Stanley Kubrick trivia. How wonderful is that? Now, you also usually have the Gloriana Queen's Row barge over here, but we can't quite see it. The area is blocked off at the moment, so we can't quite see the Gloriana. But if we come around this way, we might be able to get a quick glimpse of the wonderful row barge Gloriana. Right here, actually we can. So that's nice, but we can't go a bit any further up over there. But the Gloriana row barge, the Queen's row barge, is a lasting legacy of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee in 2012. The 18-oared row barge is inspired by the ceremonial Thames row barges from the 18th century, and it has a saloon or salon, coach, and fine Regency-style decoration, fully gilded in gold leaf, and includes 16 crests representing the realms of the Commonwealth. Gloriana is an all-wood structure using British oak, Iroko, sweet chestnut, and full Lloyd's Register marine plywood. So how lovely is this boat, guys? Simply phenomenal. Now over here we've got a bridge that opens up once again. Quite a few bridges that do open up here in St Katharine's Docks. They often have tall ship festivals here, and of course yacht festivals and classic boat festivals. So always keep an eye out online for St Katharine's Docks, as there are lots of wonderful things that happen in this lovely little marina of sorts. You also have wonderful cafes and restaurants, and also chain restaurants like Ziti over here, but you also have some interesting shops and things like that. So it is a very lovely little area. But the real draw is just looking at these yachts, having a coffee with a view of these yachts, and just imagining yourself on one of these. I always like to say when I'm doing the tour here, this is my Monday ship, that's my Tuesday boat, that's my Wednesday yacht, etc. But it is quite wonderful. And of course around Christmas they do have Christmas lights here as well, which is quite phenomenal. Up over there we're coming on another bridge that we will walk over as well. And on the other side of the bridge is an interesting pub. Now, do any of you like Charles Dickens? Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Charles Dickens. I do think he wrote too much. Of course, he was getting paid by the word, so it makes sense that he wrote too much. However, on the other hand, I love Fyodor Dostoevsky, the Russian writer. And of course, he wrote a lot more than Dickens. I always like to quote Ernest Hemingway when it comes to Dostoevsky. And Ernest Hemingway, in his book A Movable Feast, said of Fyodor Dostoevsky, "I don't know how a man can write so much about nothing and still be so compelling." I did find Dostoevsky more compelling than Dickens, but I do think I'm in the minority. I think more people prefer Dickens to Dostoevsky. However, if you do love Dickens, even if you don't, it's quite a lovely little inn right here on the other side of this bridge that we're just walking past. You can see it a little bit. The black wooden building is the famous Dickens Inn, and it is just there. And in fact, when you go to the toilets, the men's toilets at any rate, they have quotes on the walls, and one of my favorite quotes is an Ernest Hemingway quote once again, and it says, "Always do," well, it goes something along the lines of, "Always do sober that which you promised to do drunk." No better quote was ever written, no better words were ever written. But this is the wonderful Dickens Inn, to commemorate Dickens. So it wouldn't have been here when Dickens was alive, but apparently it was built with the permission of some of his descendants. So quite a fascinating place, and it is simply gorgeous at Christmas. But imagine having a pint or tea. They do tea and coffee and things like that, and they do food as well in this beautiful area. Now, quite a few things have been filmed here at St Katharine's Docks, but one of my favourite series, that I think they only did 2 seasons, unfortunately, I quite enjoyed it, was none other than Stan Lee, may he rest in peace, the comic book writer. Stan Lee's amazing Lucky Man, which was quite brilliant. And if you watch Lucky Man, you can see a scene where the main character, a police officer with the City of London Police, is right here in St Katharine's Docks. It's a lovely little show. And speaking of police, quite close to where we are, you have technically, they do claim to be the first police force in the world, though you have many people who claim to be the first police force in the world. The French claim that, the Egyptians with the Magi claim that, and of course the Bow Street Runners claim to be the oldest police force in the world. It's always quite fascinating, but in fact we can see another organisation that claims to be the oldest police force in the world, and it is none other than the Thames River Police. You can see their boat going past over there. And the Thames River Police were founded just before the Metropolitan Police, but also the Scottish argue that they had the first police just before the Thames River Police. And of course York Minster had their own police dating back to the 12th and 13th centuries. So it is a very complex thing talking about the history of policing. But the Thames Police were founded to fight river piracy because, as I mentioned, all the goods would be coming here. And they would be going to places like Butler's Wharf, Hayes Wharf, which is now Hayes Galleria, which we saw earlier. And on any given day, you could have more than £20 million, or quite a lot of money on the river, depending on which way you do the calculations, of course. But because of this, a lot of people would think it would be quite easy to steal, especially because there'd be so many boats on the River Thames. If you've ever played Assassin's Creed Syndicate, you may remember where you jump over the boat to get from one side of the river to the other. It was literally like that. There'd be a gridlock, sometimes for months, where boats wouldn't move because the London Port Authority, or the old Customs House, was where you had to declare all of your goods when you brought them into London. And as such, you could be stuck here for a very long time, and this is one of the ways St Katharine's Docks became so rich. But because of this, you had so many pirates on the river, and not too far from where we are, you actually have a place where the pirates used to be executed in London. In Wapping, you have Execution Dock, which is a mile stretch of beach on the River Thames where pirates would be taken for execution. Often they will be tried at the Old Bailey, the Central Criminal Court, and most would be held at Marshalsea Prison in Southwark, but some of them would be held in Newgate Prison next to the Old Bailey. Newgate Prison was demolished, but the Old Bailey still exists to this day. But also along this little walk you get some wonderful shots of Tower Bridge. Now this area used to have an interesting name just beneath the Tower Bridge. Of course, this dates back to before Tower Bridge was actually built. And this spot apparently used to be called Dead Man's Hole, because any dead bodies that ended up in the River Thames, considering piracy once again, any of them would be washed up over here by the tide. You can see a bit of the tide over there. So when they ended up in the river, if they were in this section, the tide would bring them, those bodies in and wash them up over here in a place that used to be called Dead Man's Hole. And apparently the Costa Coffee that you see over here used to be a morgue or mortuary of sorts, where those bodies would be taken and put into what is now Costa Coffee. I wouldn't be surprised if that place is in fact haunted. But now let's go check out a little bit of the outside of the Tower of London. This is of course Walk to the Tower. We have arrived at the Tower. Now even if you don't go inside the Tower, there's still a lot of wonderful things to see outside the Tower. You have these wonderful cannons just outside. You of course have the wonderful river views over here. And you can walk around the entirety of the Tower of London from outside, getting wonderful photo opportunities. But look at that silhouette. The sun is directly behind Tower Bridge. But another amazing thing is outside the tower, you have these little panels that give you a bit of the history of the wonderful Tower of London, which we can see part of over here. Now the actual Tower of London is the White Tower, first tower to be built under the orders of William the Conqueror. However, you have so many other towers, including the Cradle Tower, where King Edward III built the Cradle Tower in the 1300s as his private palace entrance. Battlements, arrow loops and 2 portcullises defend this important river gate from attack. So how wonderful is that? Now, still by the Cradle Tower, we have this lovely panel, which has a very interesting story, one of the very few escapes that happened from the Tower of London. This is the story of Catholic priest John Gerard, who was imprisoned and tortured in the tower for being a spy on the orders of Queen Elizabeth I, who we can see a little bit over there. And of course, we can see some of the torture methods that happen over here. But one of the most interesting stories is that John Gerard, the priest, was able to actually escape. And he made a daring escape from the rooftop on the night of the 4th of October 1597. And Gerard made a successful escape by climbing down the Cradle Tower by rope, and then he fled to a boat waiting by the wharf below. And that's one of the little stories of someone escaping from the notorious Tower of London. Now that big tower with the Union flag flying is the actual Tower of London, which of course is the White Tower. If you ever visit the Tower of London and you don't go into the White Tower, you have not actually visited the Tower of London. You've technically visited the grounds of the Tower of London. And of course over here we have another tower, the St Thomas Tower. One of the most famous things about St Thomas Tower is this gate over here. Do any of you recognize this little rhyme? Remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. Now, the tower was famously used as a prison, and in fact a lot of traitors would be held. If you committed the crime of treason, you would be held in the Tower of London. And of course, if you committed the crime of treason, you had a special entrance to the tower just for you and your fellow traitors. And it was none other than the Traitors' Gate right here by St Thomas's Tower. It is the grandest and most notorious river entrance to the tower. Famous Tudor prisoners included the sad story of Lady Jane Grey, also known as the Queen of 9 Days, who was executed here. But also another famous prisoner to enter here, another famous traitor, was Guy Fawkes, along with some of his co-conspirators, who when they were imprisoned here at the Tower of London, they entered the tower via the notorious Traitors' Gate. Now, what you often get is some people come and use it as a wishing well. If you look down there, you can actually see the little glittering pieces in the water. Those are coins that people have come to throw into the water right here by Traitors' Gate. Over here we are now by the western entrance to the Tower of London. If you were not a traitor, but you were a normal criminal, you had a very different entrance. And did you know that the kings and queens kept lions on this spot for hundreds of years? These royal beasts roared at people entering the tower. And it was quite a terrifying tactic used by the royal family, or the kings and queens rather, because imagine you were coming into the tower as a prisoner, and of course we need to remember that the tower was also used as a place of execution, along with several other things, including as a royal mint. But imagine coming in as a prisoner. You know that some people have been executed here at the Tower of London, so you have to come through and you have mighty beasts, the king of the jungle, the lion, like we can see over there, roaring at you. That would be quite terrifying. You might be forgiven for imagining, am I going to be fed to the lions? Now, of course, there are no records of anyone ever being fed to the lions, at least as far as I'm aware, so you would not have been fed to the lions, but it would have been something to be terrified of. Now we have arrived at the end, and we have of course walked to the tower. Highly recommend you visit the Tower of London if you ever have the opportunity. It is a wonderful and historic place dating back to around the 1070s. William the Conqueror, William I, William of Normandy, as he was sometimes known, ordered that the tower be built mainly as a fortress to protect London from attack by the river, but it was also built for many different reasons. And in fact, over here we have something quite wonderful that was going all summer long and is still going into the autumn, and it is none other than Super Bloom. It will be back next year, so we will visit it once again, but do give us a follow on the other social media sites because we did actually do lives of Super Bloom on Facebook and TikTok. But over here we have walked to the tower. Hope you've enjoyed yourselves, guys. I have been Vincent from Wonders of London. Do give us a follow, hit the subscribe button, etc. if you want more amazing walks and tours around London. But here we have the view of the Tower of London. Do enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, etc. wherever you are. Bye.